President and CEO of Project Assistance. Gus founded Project Assistance in 1996 with the goal of transforming our clients' approach to portfolio and project management to achieve a standard of excellence in execution that consistently delivers expected project outcomes. Gus is a portfolio and project management expert. He's a published author of many popular articles and books on the subject of project management, including contributions to several editions of Macmillan's popular Q book station using Microsoft Project. He's also the author of the project management content in the 3rd edition of Expediting Drug and Biologics Development, and he's been a presenter at several national meetings of the Drug Information Association. Gus?
Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I want to start off the presentation today by just quickly reviewing our agenda. And one of the first things we want to do is talk about identifying real expectations. This webinar came about over the past couple of years after observing a trend that many of you who are around PMOs, I would suggest, have probably seen a similar trend, and that is a reduction in the shelf life of PMOs themselves, a reduction in the shelf life of the PMO directors involved in either setting up or maintaining an existing PMO. And that there's a phenomenon that happens in organizations that create PMOs, and so we created this webinar to really talk about what we've seen, the trends we've seen in the marketplace around project management, and what the expectations are. For example, the real expectations, and I use that in italics because that's not always what we find out in the beginning. It's sort of like the real agenda or with the hidden agenda. We also have along with those expectations come a whole set of challenges that PMOs are saddled with based on those expectations. Some of the consequences we see of an ineffective PMO, a realistic approach to managing the expectations that are out there, and then we'll discuss some next steps. And finally, as Jan mentioned, when we come down to the end, we'll save a few minutes at the end for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please submit them to the question console. If it's something during the presentation that you'd like to talk about, I'll try to answer it on the fly if I can. So the expectations game, as I mentioned, is getting beyond that hidden agenda. And I don't mean to suggest that these agendas are always hidden. Sometimes the high expectations that are put out there for PMOs can be very visible, but what we really want to do is really get to understanding what those expectations are and seeing what we can do about getting them documented. So the first expectation we see is there's an expectation for results now, results overnight, however you want to look at it. There's typically a timeline associated with getting a PMO funded. There's some period of time that passes. There's some funding that has to go out there, and typically that comes from some level of pain within the organization. So because of the issues that have been existing in the organization that have caused the genesis of the PMO, what we see is some pretty high expectations that the PMO is going to deliver results immediately. So one of the things that the organization expects is if projects haven't been on time, on budget, and on spec, that now that we have a PMO, that's going to happen now. And it's going to happen overnight. Typically, the other thing that happens is because PMOs are oftentimes hard to justify, we see a disconnect between the amount of initial investment that's put on a table for a PMO and really to get to the results of those expectations, that there's probably a greater amount of both time and dollars that are needed. And it's just like almost any other project out there. A lot of projects are brought into existence with some scope limits, some budget limits, some schedule limits that are going to cause some negotiations in what ultimately gets delivered. And PMOs are no different. The third one we'll talk about is the lack of awareness of what it really takes to get project management maturity to evolve. Those of you who either are or have been project managers, I think you know that one of the greatest things we can get into a project manager's background is experience. So there's a thought oftentimes that if we send people to a training class, that they should become good project managers. And it's a little bit like a Top Gun analogy. You know, if you're looking for somebody to be fighter caliber status or fighter pilot status, you're just not going to see that overnight. So that evolution of an organization's project management maturity oftentimes again, there's an expectation out there that that's going to happen overnight. A broad mission for the PMO. You know, if a PMO comes into existence, there's oftentimes an expectation that all of the project management problems in an organization for all of the projects are going to come under the mission of the PMO. And when I say all the projects, that can run the gamut from IT projects to research and development projects to facilities management projects, and even those at the board level. Some of the initiatives we see for the overall objectives of the organization oftentimes can be expected to come under that broad umbrella, yet, as we mentioned, there's some limited resources in a PMO oftentimes. The last one is some competing priorities, and there's just a couple of quick examples here, but usually, you know, there's a priority to get active projects fixed that are broken. There's a priority to get balanced capacity versus demand, that there's new projects coming on all the time, and the reason people are looking for a better look at the capacity versus the demand is that the organization wants to be more able, more confident in making commitments back to the organization when it comes to a portfolio of projects, to be able to say, yes, we can get this next slate of projects done because we know what it takes. We have a sense of what the current projects are, what the future projects are, what the balance is between resource capacity versus demand. And usually there's a desire to attack, I'll say, all the methodologies. We, you know, in our world around projects and portfolios, we're typically dealing with three major families of methodologies. There's the portfolio management, or are we doing the right projects methodology. There's the project management, which is at the execution level, the on time, on budget aspect of that, and then there's also what we refer to as life cycle methodology. This idea of, if we're delivering systems, software development life cycle, if we're delivering products, a PLM or a product life cycle methodology. So a lot of those competing priorities lead to this results now kind of mentality. Well, you know, we can do project management first, but that means we might not get the life cycle methodology down, or it means that we may not get the project management methodology down in our first pass. So you know, one of the big ones is that there is really a desire to be a clear ROI. You know, if we're going to spend money on a PMO, how can we prove that things are getting better in the future? And one of the ways to do that is to compare how things were before a PMO was brought into existence versus how they are now, sort of the before and after picture. And one of the challenges with that is we might, for example, say, well, let's say that an ROI would be that our average project duration has gotten smaller, or our average project cost has come down, or if we were delivering so many defects, or however you want to measure being on spec, we're now being on spec more often, whether it's bugs in software, whether it's product failures in the marketplace, whether it's customer complaints, however you would measure the failure of the product. One of the big challenges we see is that while a PMO who's creating a project management, portfolio management environment may be able to give answers to those questions on what I'll call an after basis once we've made the improvements, oftentimes those measurements don't exist. And frankly, if they did exist, you might not need a PMO. So the analogy I like to use, it's a little bit like saying I've been on a diet for 6 months and I've lost a lot of weight. And you say, well, how much did you lose? And you say, well, I never got on a scale before I went on this diet. So this idea that I don't know how much weight I've lost, and the weight in this case would be the amount of resources and the amount of duration we need, it's oftentimes very hard to say. As a matter of fact, if you've done any research on your own, in the marketplace, there's scant evidence of return on investment for these investments in project management. And I'm not saying it's not there, but you know, even if you take to your management an industry trend, a Gartner report, one of those kinds of things, the question oftentimes is, that's great, but how does that apply to me? How does that apply to our organization? So establishing a clear ROI can be challenging because the before metrics and not yet available after metrics really can't be compared yet. The other question would be how are we going to define ROI? What in fact is the expectation? What's the timeline? And part of that is really to, while you're at it, while you're justifying the projects, let's justify the existence of the PMO. So it's all these challenges that really lead to this question, this expectation that the PMO can handle everything. So how do we see that? Well, from a technology standpoint, we're going to ask a PMO to go out there and select and recommend a portfolio, or a project and portfolio management solution, PPM solution. So you ought to know everything. You ought to know everything about the pluses and minuses of Clarity versus PlanView versus Microsoft Project Server versus Primavera versus all the hosted solutions that are out there as software as a service. There's a wide array of options available to us, and it's really difficult for a PMO to handle that expectation that, in fact, that you can handle everything. The other thing is, even if I mean, let's say you were blessed with a PMO that when you look at all the folks, let's say there's a group of people in a PMO, that in fact you have the market covered. Even in that case, that we know the technologies that are out there, the problem we often see is that there's really not a selection and implementation process that happens against the real requirements. And the reason the word real is italicized here in the second bullet under technology is requirements are a dangerous thing when they're not cast against a project office's knowledge of the maturity of the organization, or granted the authority to build requirements against a realistic set of capabilities of the organization. So the real requirements we would define as a balanced set of requirements, balanced across technology, balanced across process, balanced across people capabilities, such that when we start selecting technology to be able to assist and streamline the PMO's job, that we in fact are choosing something that's realistic. Now let me give you a quick example. We walk into an organization with a blank sheet of paper and say, what are your requirements? And we start writing those requirements down. If you ask an organization what are their requirements, what you're going to get is their ideal requirements, which is great. We all like to have an ideal view of the future, and it's nice to know what that should look like, and it's great to be able to have a vision like that. The challenge we see is that the expectation is that vision of the future will be achieved in one business cycle, one round of implementation of technology, process, and training. So that can really be very challenging to be able to elicit those real requirements. The other challenge is to put these solutions in. It's typically there's some customization required. You look at how, let's say, an SAP or an Oracle financial ERP system gets implemented. There's an expectation that if you spend $5 million on software, you're going to spend 10 or 15 million customizing it. That same mentality oftentimes doesn't map to the world of portfolio and project management. That if we're going to implement a solution, let's have a solution that's out of the box. That'll be fine for our requirements, and it may be okay for an initial pilot, but the reality is most organizations really can't survive and really can't get the executive support required to survive without really putting in a solid customized solution, or at least highly configured solution. And in the last one, in terms of handling everything, this happens especially in the larger companies. We've already invested in a PMO, so why do we have to go outside for help? So oftentimes there's not a budget for outside expertise. From a methodology standpoint, there's an expectation that the PMO can handle everything, including familiarity with all the latest methodologies in all three areas, portfolio, project, and life cycle. And by the way, there can be a variety of life cycle methodologies. We talked about IT, we talked about software development, we talked about facilities management, and there's many, many others out there. There's even subheadings under software development. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge to expect, especially a small PMO. We see a lot of one-person PMOs, so it's especially challenging for one person to know all these things and be able to really add that kind of value to the organization across all these pillars. There's also an expectation that you can just go ahead and build one from scratch. We got a PMO, we're not planning to spend any more money, can't you just build a methodology? So that creates its own set of challenges. As a matter of fact, the same thing happens on the technology side. Why don't we just build a quick portal and make it work for everybody, and what we quickly find out is custom solutions don't really have the power of, for example, an off-the-shelf project scheduling engine. We can do it in the spreadsheet, but when one of the predecessor changes, I now have to manually move out every successor to that task or to that phase. And again, the budget for outside expertise or content oftentimes isn't there. So we want a methodology, but we don't want it to pay for a methodology. We've got a PMO. Why would we pay for a methodology? Or why would we pay for a consulting firm who's an expert in methodologies to come in and help us get this thing, even if you had an off-the-shelf methodology, to get it fit right for your organization against your real requirements. And finally, the people, getting the people up to speed, getting them trained, getting them mentored. The expectation is that the PMO can probably do all that as well, that you are the intergalactic geniuses of project and portfolio management, so go ahead and impart your knowledge to the rest of the galaxy. And again, finally, no budget for outside expertise or content. Again, training content can be developed from scratch, but there's an awful lot out there on the marketplace that it shouldn't be necessary for a PMO to have to do that. So the other expectation when we get, and this doesn't just happen with PMOs, this happens oftentimes, just putting a project manager on a project, whether it's a PMO or not. If those of you who are project managers, I'm sure, have experienced this, by naming a project manager, the assumption is that because we're now herding cats for a living, that we can now do other people's jobs. So, for example, the stakeholders in the organization oftentimes will take a step back. They're busy. They've got other things to do. It's a matrix organization. The resources you have on a project have other full-time jobs. So now that we have this PMO in place or these project managers in place, they can fill this void. And gee, what else do you have to do anyhow besides that silly planning stuff? Can't you just go ahead and make sure the requirements and design are correct without getting the right involvement from the stakeholders? So we really need to get to, we really need to have that commitment from the stakeholders yet. If we're expected to do that can be pretty difficult. Driving organizational alignment. I mean, that's ultimately that's the job of the leadership, right? The culture and the alignment within an organization comes from the executive support that we get. And if there's not overt executive support, driving organizational alignment can really be challenging for a PMO to do. And oftentimes, it's one of the reasons that we see them being dismantled. One of the things the PMO can oftentimes is expected to do is project managers don't necessarily report into a PMO, and even if they do, sometimes the PMO lacks the authority to drive the alignment, to drive the stakeholders to get the right level of involvement. So it's hard to make project managers successful. But heck, if we had a bunch of project managers struggling to get their projects done, and now we put a PMO in place, why shouldn't you be making sure that those project managers are being successful? And it's a project manager's job and a PMO's job to put some way of monitoring risks and issues, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to make sure they don't have any impact. It's sort of a shoot the messenger kind of mentality. That if you were a better PMO, wouldn't you make sure that projects don't have issues? Aren't you there to make sure there aren't any risks? What do you mean there's issues and risks? Why are we having this? Why did we make this investment if we're going to be having issues and risks? So we got to wear a lot of hats, or as the picture shows, maybe have a lot of arms. Cure organizational dysfunction. Organizations that have problems with projects are typically pretty dysfunctional, at least from a project management standpoint. From the view. From the way we would design an organization to be functional in a project-based environment, we often see this dysfunction in the organization, and there's an expectation to diagnose, communicate, and solve, and really address the dysfunctions and solve as in cure. So these are some pretty lofty expectations. So in case you were wondering what keeps a PMO director up at night, there you have it. So tomorrow night is nothing but one long, sleepless wrestle with yesterday's omissions and regrets. So what does keep the PMO director up at night? And I think we probably covered some of that already, but the reality is the PMO can't handle everything, right? So one of the things we recognize as PMO directors is that we're unable to be the experts on all the latest solutions. It's hard to manage the selection and implementation without real requirements. It's extremely difficult because, again, you get those nirvana-like requirements, those visions of the future that set the wrong expectation. You end up with a set of requirements that says we're going to make everything better now. We start absorbing those real expectations. The PMO realizes out of the box probably isn't going to solve the problem. There needs to be additional investment, and we're going to need a budget for some outside expertise, whether it's to do the customizations, whether it's to hire a company that can do the implementation, whether it's to get below that glossy exterior, the shimmering, shiny marketing materials that said this solution can do everything for us, to really dive down and understand what works and what doesn't. Oftentimes requires that outside expertise. The PMO is unfamiliar with the latest methodologies, at least all of them. There may be something very relevant out there for the organization, but maybe we're not aware of that. It is difficult to build a system from scratch, and if we're going to have content and expertise, we're going to need some budget for that. PMOs are usually a challenge to deliver all the training. As a matter of fact, one of the things we often see, especially in the small PMO, is if the organization is project management challenged, what we'll see is that the head of the PMO gets drawn into the most challenging and high visibility project, and in fact becomes either part-time or, in the worst case scenario, no time available to actually run the PMO. And that's very, very common in new PMOs. And so not only are we maybe not having the content, or do we not have all the expertise to deliver the training, sometimes we're not even available. And again, so what's that mean? Budget, budget, budget. So what are the challenges? What we walk into, in addition to having these expectations, we walk into this challenge where oftentimes if we're trying to get project management technology in place, there's already been a failed investment. We spent $2 million on that 3 years ago and it didn't work, and why is it going to be any different time around? And that's a valid question. Why is it going to be any different this time around? Has there been a lack of process standards that created issues as to how the technology can be an enabler? So this idea that if I buy a project management technology, that project management technology will somehow make my project managers behave, or will somehow get my stakeholders aligned, or will somehow get my executives to provide the support we need to actually do this work. So this lack of process standards, the process work needs to be done first, not second. And the other technology credibility issue that's out there is project management systems providing accurate project and resource status information. There may be technology out there already, and people have found that when they go for the so-called right answer to that technology, that in fact they don't get the answer. The hallway conversations and the ad hoc meetings, in fact, will provide more reliable status information in the email system, let's say, than the project management technology can. So all those things lead to a lack of credibility for the technology itself. The other challenge, a lack of or improper adoption of project management processes. Again, the technology as an enabler is supposed to be enabling something. It's not technology for technology's sake, but there ought to be something to enable. Project management capabilities, lack of competent project leadership. So again, an organization that hasn't been great at project management isn't going to get good at it overnight, and especially in a case where the project managers are being grown from within. Not that that's a bad idea, but it takes time. It takes time, and it takes failures, and it takes some real war battles and stories, and unfortunately for most project managers, a failed project or two before we really have those capabilities to learn from our mistakes and to be better next time. And the portfolio capture, evaluation, and selection process is inconsistent. So, a lot of organizations have been doing something like this for a long time. Projects somehow do get proposed and approved. There is oftentimes an annual budget process. It's a slow process. We start in August or September. We don't know what our projects are until February or March of the following year, and it's only a short amount of time before we're back into the cycle again. So they lack accurate information, they lack flexibility, they lack standardization, and that creates its own set of challenges. And What's that mean? Well, it means the wrong projects happen, right? So we're saddled with an inability to identify and select the projects that drive the most value to the business. And not only that, not only the wrong project selected, sometimes we know it's the wrong project and it's allowed to continue. And so these are all problems. And PMOs don't always have the authority to do something about that. I said one of the things we'll help you do is to help your projects fail faster. And one of the senior folks in the room stopped me and said, "Whoa, wait a second. We don't talk about failing projects around here. Our projects don't fail." And to me, that's a red flag. I mean, projects do fail, and the sooner we can identify, either before we start them or once we start them early in the process, that they're not the right projects, the better off we're going to be. The lack of appropriate funding. I mentioned the budget word several times already, but there's plenty of obstacles out there. There's plenty of big boulders in the road that we're going to have to try to get around, and certainly a lack of appropriate funding is one of the big ones that we see. A lack of a clearly defined PMO mission. You know, the lack of a clearly defined PMO mission comes from those unspoken expectations, and even for the spoken expectations, they have a very broad array of expectations. And as a result, we get muddiness. And as we know in most communications, things need to be written down. We get a whisper down the lane effect, and that's a dangerous place for a project management organization to find itself. The lack of an early warning system. So this idea of, our project stalled, our projects out there that should be canceled, our resources not showing up, are they not available, are they impacting the end date even before they start? And the big one we see out there, and I'll get to this in a couple slides down the road here, the lack of governance is needed to drive adoption. So we see an awful lot of project management process put in place without an accompanying governance process that says, well, if we're going to put a project management process in, how are we going to make sure it's getting followed? And we've seen an awful lot of organizations lack either the experience or the support to understand that changing the organization, in fact, is also a process, right? People need to understand their role, and there's a way to do that from a process standpoint. There's a process for driving improved outcomes. There's a way to identify where there's training opportunities, where project managers need to be replaced. There's all these things, and I'll get to a little bit more detail in a moment, but lack of governance as a process oftentimes is a big red flag that we see in a lot of these initiatives. So what are the consequences of an ineffective PMO? And wisdom consists of the anticipation of consequences. So one of the things we see is this wasted investment due to inadequate or misdirected spending, right? So if we've had this investment that the organization views as wasted or inappropriate or inadequate or misdirected, what we see is ineffective solutions. And in addition to the ineffective solutions, we see technology gets bought and it gets put on the shelf. So and the problem with an ineffective solution is a lot of times what happens is project and portfolio management technology is put in place, and some part of it gets used, but not the part that everybody was expecting to use. So ineffective in our terminology is really getting to the idea that there was a set of expectations, there were a set of requirements, there was an idea that when we put the timesheets, everything was going to be reflected and provide variance analysis for us, yet what ends up happening is we back off of that expectation and we water it down, and while this technology may still be running, in fact it's ineffective compared to expectations. The next most serious one is obviously the shelfware, that the solution in fact is shelved. That I'm amazed at the hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars that we see organizations spend for things that are either never rolled out or rolled out and stopped. Same thing with methodology. We see I call it dusty methodology binders, but a lot of these things aren't in binders anymore. They're in files, obviously, or file shares or portals. But the idea of dusty is a metaphor for really not being used, underutilized, and again, like the technology, becoming shelfware. We see increased overhead, right? So we're spending money on project managers and PMOs, yet we're not going to get demonstrated ROI. So that's if we're not careful as a PMO, we get out there and we make those improvements, yet we don't spend the time to actually capture the goodness, capture the value, communicate the message. And, it gets personal sometimes. I mean, we hopefully have enough pride to want to go out there and do a good job, but, we get this both on a personal level or on an organizational level. It's embarrassing to take a lot of time and take a lot of resources and money in the organization and not deliver results. Obviously, the inconsistent project outcomes, so the projects are, in fact, late. They're over budget. They're not delivering the specification. I mentioned already the continuation of failing projects. If you've been on previous webinars, you've probably heard me use this analogy. If you haven't, then this will be the first time. I use this analogy of a bridge out. If we get on a train and we find out the bridge is out, what do? Well, if we're a project, we keep going. Right? And maybe we change the scope a little bit to say instead of getting to Baltimore, we're going to get some wet passengers out of the deal. We're going to have the day at the beach, or however you want to define it. But to me, that's failure. I mean, unless you have a legitimate reason to change the either the specs or the schedule or the budget, if we're not delivering to the expectations, we're failing. The actual improvement or expected results. So we just see this over and over again where there's an expectation put out there, and something gets put in, but it's not what people expected. Right? We got the wrong people in place. Oftentimes there's a project manager shortage. There's an expectation that we're dealing with one of these right now. We have a requirement from one of our customers to put a project manager in place, but when you read the job description, it's not anything really to do with project management. It's mostly a business analysis, and so that indicates to us that there's not a lot of project managers out there. If they're wearing the title but not actually doing the job, then when we put these standards and technologies in place, they're not going to be up for the challenge. And so, the PMO does shoulder those unrealistic responsibilities. There's things outside of the mission. There's an unclear mission. There's a whole set of expectations, and the consequences is not only do you shoulder the responsibility, but you shoulder the consequences as well. And ultimately, the PMO is now the reason. When projects were failing before we had a PMO, we weren't really that quite sure what the problem is. But now if we put on a search for the guilty, we certainly know who's that person of interest that we want to talk to, as they say in the legal profession. So I started off this conversation by saying, we put this presentation together because we see a lot of churn and turmoil in the PMO world. We talk to PMO directors that tell us right out of the gate, I don't think I'm going to be here much longer, or I'm here and I don't want to be here. I just heard one last week said I'm trying to get back on projects and get away from this impending failure because the organization is not giving it the support it needs, and I'm trying to just get back to doing what my job was before. So there are an alarming number of PMOs that are being dismantled. And I don't mean to say that that's the majority. I mean, certainly there are lots of PMOs in place that are going to be there for a long time, but we're talking about the ones that are just being formed, and there's a lack of patience with what's happening to get the next steps. So the final consequence is really this, this recipe for failure that we talk about, this idea that what we see, we call it talk, spend, talk, or talk, spend, more talk. Well, what we see a lot of is a lot of what I call column 2 spending. Right, by technology and by training. We see a lot of promises up front and a lot of expectations, but it's mostly talk. We don't see a really lot of planning and documenting of what the promises are and what the expectations are and what the mission is. We'll come back to that in a moment, but a lot of purchasing of technology, a lot of purchasing of training, and then a lot of do it or else memos. You had the training, you got the technology, now go do it, be successful. And ultimately, we shelf the shelfware, and we go back to square one if we even get that opportunity. So we'd like to spend just a few minutes about, what does a successful plan look like? If we're living in this world, and if you're identifying this world of unrealistic expectations, and how you get through this, and how you justify and how you show value, I want to start off by saying some of the things we see, what I'll call worst practices for implementing and adopting a project management solution, or what we sometimes call the perspective from a project management consulting company. And what we see are some recurring themes. We see the missing, messy, muddy requirements, right? So there's a fixation on feature function. They're not clearly articulated. They're not balanced. I mentioned this already. They're technology focused, but they're not people and process focused necessarily. Again, this is a symptom of a larger problem that says, well, we believe technology will be a cure-all. The second one is the one-click cure, and the one-click cure is, we're gonna have this highly automated process where somebody clicks to submit an idea for a project, somebody clicks to improve it, work flows over to the project manager, a bunch of people are notified about it, we submit timesheets, and one click later they're in the project management system. We one click, we tell everybody where they're late, where they're slipping, where they need to start doing something different. Oh, by the way, there's one click of the actuals from those timesheets from the project management system over to the accounting system. And by the way, let's have a one-click back. Let's have the accounting system tell us what the actual spend is, where the capital expenditures are, all that kind of business. Certainly, resource capacity versus demand. And it's not that can't happen, but again, oftentimes with overblown expectations, requirements out of line with the organization maturity, what we see is that one-click cure is not going to happen in the first phase. It's not going to happen in the first implementation. So the idea that, if that's not going to happen, let's know that ahead of time. Let's not start compromising on the back end and explaining why we didn't meet expectations. The impending organizational dysfunction. I mean, again, the lack of a plan to deal with that is really a problem. It could just as easily say continuing organizational dysfunction. But even an organization that's maybe somewhat functional under its current structure, if we change the structure, we sort of, by definition, create some dysfunction, and we have to deal with that. Beware speed kills. We see a lot of these initiatives that are expected to, we're going to be up and running in 3 months. It's April, and we want to have this thing done in July. By the way, half the people are going to be gone in July, but we still want to have it done. And ultimately, the unmapped journey, which is where I'm going to go next. And first thing I want to talk about in this best practice area is a little bit of motherhood and apple pie, right? If we look at an organization, any organization, whether it's at the top of the organization or even an organization like a PMO, there's this idea of understanding why do we exist, what are our values, what's important to us, what's our vision, what do we want to be, what's our strategy, what do we need to do to get there, what do we got to change. I view strategies as a plan for change. And ultimately, how do we implement the plan? How do we execute? And I bring this up because the challenge we see is this disconnect between the strategy and the execution. There's we as human beings have an inclination towards execution. Let's just go out and get the job done. Let's make something happen. When are we going to get done planning and do some real work? I've heard that more than once in my life. And there's just that disconnect. And what we typically speak to is, I'm sorry. Right here, the three-phase improvement approach. So I talked. The talk, spend, talk is really the three columns we see here. Again, that implement stuff column, what I call column 2, is where we see the majority of the spend. And we have found that in the world of portfolio and project management solutions, there is a high failure rate. Just like there's a high failure rate among projects, there's a high failure rate in the world of portfolio and project management solutions. If an organization buys an ERP system, the chances of that thing being implemented and rolled out probably are in the 90% range, higher than that, probably the upper 90s. If you buy a project in a portfolio management solution, and when I say a solution, I don't mean just technology, there's a greater than 50-50 chance that solution, in fact, is not going to be implemented and succeed against initial expectations. Something might get implemented, don't get me wrong, but my point of saying that on this slide is that we have found, for the ones that do succeed, there's a very, very high correlation between not just focusing on let's get a spec, develop something, install it, configure it, implement it, train it, roll it out. That there really is some upfront thinking about current state, future state, how big is the gap, what's the strategy. By the way, if we have an idea of how far we are from our future state, from our current state, those requirements that get developed, that scoping that occurs, those expectations that get managed, in fact, are going to become more realistic. So we see that as an exercise in driving realism into requirements. On the back end, portfolio governance, we see portfolio management not only as the process of managing the projects in the portfolio, selecting and managing those projects, but also governing the project management process to, in fact, provide training to the project managers, coaching and mentoring to the organization, process adoption and audit. Are we actually going out there and making sure that the process is being followed? And if not, what's the reporting and escalation? What's the intervention and corrective action that says we might cancel one of these things and replace a project manager or impact their income, a comp plan? And then, of course, the ongoing support. So just a moment on the first column. I'm sorry, this is a repeat. The first column here of the tactical plan. When I mentioned executive support and governance, we talk about that because when there's an overemphasis on technology, not only does the process work have a tendency to play second fiddle, not only do the people capabilities, the training aspect, not only training and mentoring, but getting some experience in these project managers play second fiddle, but the whole idea of a change management plan is infrequently a formal part of what we see. And as a result of that, because the changes in plans, we see a real lack of ability to integrate the process, the technology, and the people capabilities. So what we're really talking about here is what I call the project. How do we treat getting better at project and portfolio management like a project? What are those best practices? And nothing that would make you fall out of your chair if you're a project manager. I mean, we need executive support. Project management improvement plan has to be formal. It's got to be approved. It shouldn't be an informal understanding of organizational needs. If there's real expectations, they should be documented. If they're not documented, then they shouldn't be expectations. There shouldn't be any expectations like that. And this idea of creating a vision and a clear charter, what we call the tactical plan, at the end of the day, is like any charter or any scoping document for a project. That if there's an expectation, and there often is, that a PMO is going to pull together every active project and give us a view of resource capacity versus demand, if we put the right plan in place, we'll be able to use that as a communication tool, and in some cases, frankly, as a defensive shield against the expectations of the organization that says, well, how come you've been in existence since January, and by April 1st, we don't have that view of resource capacity versus demand? Well, hey, let's go to the plan. Let's take a look at that. It says here that that's level 4 maturity on time tracking, and we really can't know where everybody is in the organization until we collect actuals and start reprojecting against those actuals. And by the way, we said we were going to build an estimating methodology first, and then we said we were going to get plans on every project, and then we said we were going to start baselining those plans, and then we said we were going to do schedule variance against baseline, and at some point we were going to do labor variance against baseline. And until I can get a labor variance against baseline, it's awful hard for me to tell you capacity versus demand. Here's the plan. So now I can tell you that in December of this year, or April of next year, we're going to deliver that promise of capacity versus demand. Now, is it okay to make everybody wait 15 months? Probably not. But if we build the right kind of charter, we can manage those expectations and find a way to deliver enough value early that there's a continued move towards investment and not to pull the plug. That if we manage those expectations like any project, and we have the risks pointed out, and we have the issues logged, and we treat this like a project, and we expect it to be run that way, then we have a chance. The problem is, if we have an organization that's not good at project management, the first one is going to be hard to run well, and it happens to be this one. Measure and communicate progress to the organization against an improvement plan. So if we have a charter, if we have a vision and a scope, if we have a project plan for what this thing's going to do, that we go ahead and run it that way. And it's probably a program plan. It's probably more than one project. and demonstrate positive project control. So and when I say positive project control, I mean over this project. Okay, so what I want to just spend a moment about is just talking about some next steps here. As many of you know, I know we have some repeat attendees on here. We are a project and portfolio management consulting company. Our mission, in fact, and value proposition is that we do help make the world a better place for project management. What's that mean? We, in fact, do transform our clients' approach to portfolio and project management. We really help them achieve the standard of excellence in execution, which delivers project outcomes, and not surprisingly, that happens through our three-column solution approach. We're very hesitant when customers want to focus just on column 2, because the expectation is out there that that we have to do this in a way that reduces risk. We can't spend a lot of money and not get results. And following the three-column solution approach, in fact, reduces risk. There is a way to show not only maximization of our return on investment, but incremental return on investment, which goes hand in hand with speeding the realization of value. Yeah, we may not have resource capacity for 15 months, but we can show some other things in the meantime that have value, that are worth doing, that make us want to continue down this path, and ultimately drives effective organizational change. Change is difficult, and there's an embedded culture in every organization around projects, and oftentimes it needs to change. So our practices, our project management portfolio practice, we have collaboration services, including SharePoint, education and competency development. We do some application development, most often around project and portfolio and project accounting. Outsourcing of project management, oftentimes that's some kind of support and ongoing solution care and feeding. We provide project managers and portfolio managers on a staffing basis, and that's an important part of our business. And we also provide add-on products for project management solutions. So I'll get to next steps and questions. If you're interested in the process, if the three-column process intrigues you, if you have a PMO that lacks funding, that lacks clarity and vision, that has the expectation challenges, we can certainly come out there and help you define the requirements for a successful PPM improvements to the organization. We focus on the hot spots. Usually project management reporting is a problem. People want to see dashboards. The technology is upside down a lot of times. The resource planning and balancing is a mess. The governance is usually lacking. So if you want to have somebody look under the hood and help you figure out where you might go with this, we'd be happy to do that on a complimentary basis to get you started. And we have a methodology for looking at this. We have definitions of current state, future states. There's a way to really define this in very succinct and very tangible ways. There is a format for a roadmap that can be used, and there's obviously addressing of common portfolio and project management challenges. So you see Jan's information up here. Today's webinar, we hope, is being recorded. We're never quite sure until we turn this thing off whether it worked or not. But if all goes according to plan, we'll have a recorded webinar out there probably by tomorrow, if not, certainly next week. And if you want to see our future upcoming webinars, or if you want to see some of our past webinars, you can go out to our website on the link provided. And with that, I will turn the floor back over to Jan. If you have questions, please submit them now. If you've already submitted questions, we'll answer them now. Do we have any questions yet, Jan?
I do have a few, Beth, so why don't I just get started with the first one? What percentage of PMOs that we talk to have a budget for outside help?
What? Say that again?
What percentage of PMOs that we talk to already have a budget for outside help?
Okay. Well, the ones we help, 100% of them have a budget for outside help, but I think you asked a different question. What percentage do we talk to that has a budget for outside help? Let's see. It varies pretty greatly. If the PMO has already been conceived, if it's already in place, and it's a big company, the percentage is pretty small. There seems to be a recurring theme in large organizations that if we have a PMO in place, if we've already invested in full-time headcount, there shouldn't be anybody coming asking for outside investment. We have a very large Fortune 500, probably Fortune 100 organization we've been talking to for, I think we can measure it in years now. I think Mark's probably on the phone listening to this, but 150 project managers can't get $10,000 for a training budget. So, you know, if it's not built in up front, if there's not an organizational culture that says we understand that our PMO is a conduit, is an agent for going into the marketplace and finding experts, it's a big challenge. And as a matter of fact, our greatest competitor are not other companies who do this. Our greatest competitors are the dollars that are being spent internally that are not going to be available for outside help. So I hope that answers your question. If not, send me an email or send Jan an email.
I think the next one will make that smile, but here you go. Do PMOs typically address project or portfolio management first?
It's a good question. It's highly dependent on who we're talking to. If we're talking to the folks that, it depends where the pain is. In other words, if we're in the senior echelons of an organization, they're more likely to talk about, we're not sure we're working on the right projects, and we think we got to do a better job of how we submit ideas, how we collect business cases around those ideas, how we compare them to one another, and how we ultimately make sure we have the right mix. So I would say that if we're talking to senior folks, they're probably addressing portfolio management. However, because project management has been a buzzword and an expected best practice for a long time, the reality is the PMOs we're talking to typically are addressing project management first.
That's all I have.
That's all you have. There's no more questions. Then I will thank you all for attending today. And again, feel free to contact us. Feel free to visit our website. Be on the lookout for our next one. And I once again thank you all for your time and attendance.